What's up, everyone? Yao here, back in your ears with another episode of the New Age Cannabis Podcast. I know, it's been a minute. Okay, it's been a whole year since our last episode, but trust me, we've been busy, and I mean really busy, diving deep into the world of cannabis research. We've got such exciting stuff to share with you, and we're stoked to be back. Now, you might be wondering why the sudden return. Well, while we were away, something huge happened. Just when you thought Election Day couldn't get any more thrilling, boom! The president went and signed the Cannabis for Private Purposes bill into law at the very last minute. Yep, you heard that right. We've got brand new Cannabis Act, and it's the first of its kind for our country. So today, we're going to break it all down. What this new cannabis law means for us as cannabis enthusiasts, what we can do now that we couldn't do before, and of course, what are the new rules that we need to watch out for? We've got all the answers, and we're going to make sure you're as excited about it as we are. But first, a huge shout out to all our loyal listeners who've been patiently waiting for our return. You guys are the real MVPs, and we've missed you. Your support means the world to us, and we're ready to make it up to you with some of the best content yet. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of New Age cannabis together. First, let's break down what this new act entails. The Cannabis for Private Purposes bill is focused on private use, which means it doesn't fully legalize cannabis, but allows adults to use it and possess it for private purposes. It's important to note that dealing is still heavily penalized, and further legislation is required to address this aspect comprehensively. So what does the Act define as cannabis? The new definition is crucial. Cannabis now refers to the flowering or fruiting tops of a cannabis plant and includes products made from these plants. However, it excludes seeds, seedlings, stalks, leaves, and branches without fruit or flowers, as well as the roots of the cannabis plant. Let's talk about the specifics of private use. Adults are now permitted to use and possess cannabis for private purposes. Sharing cannabis with other adults is also allowed, as long as no compensation or benefit is involved. However, there are strict regulations about where you can and cannot use cannabis. For instance, using cannabis in the presence of a child or a non-consenting adult is prohibited. You also can't use it near windows, ventilation inlets, doorways, or in private places that are part of public spaces where people gather closely together. Where it comes to children, their interest is paramount because the Act makes it very clear that children must not possess or use cannabis, and adults must ensure that any cannabis they have is out of the reach of children. There's severe penalties for adults who fail to comply with these regulations. Speaking of penalties, here's a quick rundown. Dealing or engaging a child to deal in cannabis can result in a fine of up to 10 years in prison or both. Possessing, cultivating, or transporting more than the prescribed amount of cannabis can lead to a fine up to 5 years in prison or both. There are also fines for failing to store cannabis properly, using it in prohibited places, and transporting it without following the set regulations. Another significant aspect of the Act is the provision for expunging past convictions related to the use or possession of cannabis. This is a huge step forward for many individuals who have been impacted by previous cannabis-related offenses. The Act also gives the Minister of Health the responsibility to regulate the maximum amounts of cannabis that can be possessed, cultivated, or transported. These regulations will need parliamentary approval before they come into effect. However, the Minister has the authority to make additional regulations necessary to achieve the objectives of the bill. In terms of other laws affected, the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act of 1992 has been amended to remove cannabis completely. Changes have also been made to the National Road Traffic Act of 1996 to specify that THC, the active component in cannabis, is not considered a narcotic drug, But there are still strict rules about driving under its influence. So what does this all mean for the future? While the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act is a significant milestone, there's still a long way to go before we see full legalization and the freedom for both the people and the plant. This act is just the beginning, and it will be interesting to see how the industry evolves and what further legislation will be introduced to address dealing and other aspects of cannabis use. That's all for today's episode of the New Age Cannabis Podcast. Stay tuned for more updates and in-depth discussions on the latest developments in the world of cannabis. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment for us on social media for more news and insights. Until next time, stay informed and stay elevated.